In 2019, England released 30 white-tailed eagles along its southern coast, the first to fly here in over a century. Within months, the coastline started to change. Carrion disappeared 27% faster. Scavenger territories contracted. Shorebird colonies reorganized. 30 birds, not 300, but 30. And that was enough to restructure an entire stretch of coast. The question isn't whether the change happened. It's how a predator absent for 100 years still held that much power over an ecosystem that had learned to live without it. The last white-tailed eagle in England was shot in 1918. With that single act, a predator that had soared over the coastlines for thousands of years vanished from the English sky. For the next century, the south coast entered a kind of ecological limbo. Without eagles to patrol the cliffs and estuaries, the balance of power among scavengers and predators began to shift. Gulls, especially black-headed and herring gulls, multiplied rapidly, expanding their nesting colonies and foraging territories into spaces once dominated by the eagles. Ravens and red foxes also claimed a greater share of shoreline carrion, filling the void left by the absent raptor. Early naturalists recorded the change in passing notes: a growing abundance of gulls on tidal flats, foxes raiding eggs along the dunes, and a coastline where carcasses lingered far longer than before. No systematic counts survived from that era, but the pattern was unmistakable. The loss of an apex scavenger allowed smaller competitors to flourish, unchecked by the threat of a larger rival. Carrion, once quickly consumed by eagles, now persisted for days, attracting gatherings of gulls and opportunistic mammals. The very rhythm of decay and nutrient recycling along the shore slowed, as no single species could match the eagle's appetite or efficiency. This new order became the baseline for generations. By the 1970s, the absence of white-tailed eagles was so complete that few remembered their ecological role. The South Coast Scavenger Guild, gulls, corvids, and foxes, grew dense and competitive, with each species exploiting a resource that once belonged to a bird twice their size. The coastline itself became a living record of what happens when a top predator is removed. Not a collapse, but a subtle, persistent drift toward imbalance. The vacuum created in 1918 shaped every interaction on the shore from that day forward. For decades, the South Coast operated under a new set of ecological rules. In the absence of white-tailed eagles, no single predator or scavenger could dominate the shoreline. Carcasses of fish, seabirds, and marine mammals washed up with each tide and often remained untouched for days. Gulls and ravens gathered in noisy flocks to pick at the remains, but their smaller size and limited appetite meant that much of the carrion lingered, slowly decomposing in place. Foxes, emboldened by the lack of aerial threat, ventured out onto the open beaches at dawn and dusk, searching for easy meals among the driftline. Over time, the coastline's scavenger community grew crowded and competitive. Black-headed gulls, herring gulls, and corvids nested in greater numbers, their colonies expanding into habitats once kept in check by the presence of a top predator. With no eagle to clear carcasses quickly, the rhythm of decay slowed. Nutrients that would have been rapidly cycled back into the ecosystem through eagle droppings instead leached out or remained locked in slowly rotting remains. This sluggish turnover left more opportunities for disease to spread among dense gull flocks, and for opportunistic mammals to scavenge at the water's edge. These changes shaped human habits as well. Coastal landowners and local councils began to factor persistent carrion into their management routines, organizing periodic cleanups to remove decomposing animals from popular beaches. Birdwatchers noted the abundance of gulls and the rare appearance of foxes in daylight, but few remembered a time when a larger raptor dictated the pace of life along the shore. By the early 2000s, this imbalance was taken for granted. The coastline, once shaped by the daily patrols of white-tailed eagles, had settled into a new normal, one defined by prolonged decay, a crowded scavenger guild, and a subtle but persistent drift away from the ecosystem's original pattern. The need for restoration was clear, but the mechanisms that held the system in this altered state would not be easily reversed. White-tailed eagles, once released, wasted no time in making their presence felt along the south coast. Their hunting and scavenging patterns quickly began to reshape the food web, not as a broad sweep, but as a daily, measurable drain on living and dead prey. Diet analysis and pellet studies from 2020 to 2024 reveal a precise breakdown. About 35% of the biomass consumed came from marine fish, gray mullet, and flatfish most often, while water birds, especially gulls and the occasional duck, made up another 28%. Carrion, from both marine mammals and terrestrial animals, supplied roughly 22% of their intake. The remaining share included live caught small mammals and, in recent years, a notable 9% from invasive American mink. Each adult eagle is capable of removing up to 3 kilograms of prey or carrion in a single day. With 30 birds active along the coast, the cumulative pressure adds up fast. Field ecologists estimate that, at peak foraging, the reintroduced eagles collectively remove nearly 90 kilograms of fish, birds, and carcasses from the system every 24 hours. This is not a static number. It fluctuates with tides, breeding cycles, and seasonal migrations, but it sets a new ceiling for top-down removal that no other coastal predator or scavenger can match. One ecologist involved in the monitoring program described the effect as a resetting of the food web clock. Where once carcasses lingered and fish shoals grew dense near the shore, now the eagles act as a constant, high-efficiency siphon. The direct removal of prey does more than just feed the birds themselves. It deprives rival scavengers of easy meals and alters the rhythm of nutrient cycling along the tidal flats. Quantifying this removal pressure, down to the kilogram and species, gives a clear scientific measure of how the eagles are once again shaping the coastline, not by their presence alone, but by the relentless, daily act of predation and scavenging. On the south coast, the return of white-tailed eagles set off a chain reaction that reached far beyond direct predation. The birds' presence alone began to reshape the daily routines of every scavenger and prey species along the shoreline. Field ecologists call this phenomenon fear ecology, the way the threat of a top predator can ripple through a system, even when the predator is not actively hunting. Gulls, once confident rulers of the tidal flats, started to avoid open beaches during daylight. Camera traps recorded a noticeable drop in daytime foraging within 5 kilometers of active eagle territories. Instead, gulls shifted their feeding to inland fields and nighttime hours, leaving behind stretches of shoreline that had been crowded with noisy flocks for decades. Ravens and foxes, too, altered their habits. Foxes, once bold enough to scavenge at dawn, began to restrict their activity to the cover of darkness, wary of being spotted from above. Ravens, faced with competition they could not match, shrank their territories and abandoned some traditional coastal roosts. The impact played out in the fate of every carcass washed up by the tide. Where carrion might have lingered for days, now it disappeared within hours. Eagles, with their keen eyesight and dominance at the carcass, forced smaller scavengers to wait at a distance or give up entirely. Monitoring teams measured a 27% increase in carrion removal rates at sites with active eagle patrols compared to control areas. This rapid turnover did not just clean the beaches, it changed the flow of nutrients, pushing marine-derived nitrogen further inland through eagle droppings and reducing the window for disease transmission among dense gull flocks. Even the behavior of shorebirds shifted. Flocks of oyster catchers and sandpipers, sensitive to the new risk from above, began to nest in safer, less exposed areas. The landscape of fear, once absent, returned in force. Every movement of an eagle overhead sent ripples through the food web, displacing some species, suppressing others, and restoring a pattern of vigilance that had been missing for a century. The coastline's rhythms, once dictated by the slow decay of carrion and the noisy squabbles of gulls, now pulsed to the silent authority of a returned apex predator. The return of white-tailed eagles to England's coastline was never a solitary effort. Every stage, from sourcing the birds to releasing them over the Isle of Wight, depended on a network of authorizations and partnerships. The legal foundation began with a license issued by Natural England, the statutory body responsible for wildlife releases. Without this approval, no eagle could legally take flight. To secure young birds from the wild, Nature Scot granted a complimentary permit, allowing the removal of nestlings from Scottish breeding sites before they imprinted on their natal landscape. Each chick's journey, from a Scottish eyrie to the southern coast, was tracked and documented under these permits. Forestry England took on the logistical challenge, providing the release infrastructure and managing the daily care of the juveniles in purpose-built aviaries. The Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation, a leading name in raptor conservation, supplied funding, technical expertise, and public engagement. DFRA, the government's Department for Environment, set the policy framework and maintained a public record of each release. These agencies are listed together on every project report, each with a defined role, with Natural England as the regulator, Nature Scot as the source authority, Forestry England as the host, Roy Dennis as the scientific partner, and DEFRA as the policy steward. This web of collaboration extended far beyond paperwork. The licenses carried strict conditions. Every eagle was fitted with a solar-powered GPS tag before release, and every movement was logged and reported to the British Trust for Ornithology. Post-release monitoring was not optional. It was a legal obligation, written into the terms of the Natural England license, and enforced through annual reporting. When a transmitter signaled a loss of contact, a field team mobilized for recovery and necropsy, with findings sent back to the licensing authority. The entire process was designed for transparency and accountability, ensuring that the reintroduction would be guided by evidence, not just enthusiasm. In the background, these institutional safeguards shaped every outcome on the coast, from the first release to the latest monitoring report. The journey from Scottish nest to English sky begins long before any eagle tastes the wind. Each juvenile, no more than 30 days old, is lifted from its nest under strict permit and transported south in climate-controlled crates. The route to the Isle of Wight is carefully timed, no more than 6 hours, to reduce stress and to avoid imprinting on the capture site. On arrival, the young eagles are settled into purpose-built aviaries, where every detail is designed for their welfare. Rearing teams provide a diet of fresh fish, carrion, and small mammals, mimicking the variety found in the wild. Human contact is kept to a minimum, just enough to allow safe handling while preserving the bird's natural wariness. Flight training begins in stages. Inside the aviary, eagles are encouraged to stretch and exercise their wings, building up the muscle and coordination needed for survival. Only when each bird demonstrates strong, controlled flight does the next phase begin. The soft release protocol calls for a move into a release loft, a sheltered enclosure perched at the edge of the release zone. Here the birds spend between 48 and 72 hours, acclimating to local wind patterns and the sounds of the coastline. Food is provided, but the loft's design encourages the eagles to observe and memorize the landscape beyond the mesh, laying down the mental map they will rely on after release. Cohorts are kept small, usually 5 to 8 birds at a time, to avoid crowding and reduce competition. The timing is precise. At dawn, when the air is still and the risk of disturbance is lowest, the doors are opened. Each eagle is free to choose its moment. Some leap immediately, others wait, scanning the horizon before launching. Program carers watch from a distance, ready to intervene only if a bird fails to take flight or shows signs of distress. This careful, welfare-minded approach ensures that every eagle starts its new life with the best possible chance. It also allows for the attachment of lightweight telemetry harnesses before release, setting the stage for detailed post-release tracking and data collection that will drive future conservation decisions. Every eagle released onto the Isle of Wight carried a solar-powered GPS unit, logging its position every 3 hours during daylight. Over 5 years, this tracking network has built a detailed record of movement, territory, and survival. The data reveal that most juveniles dispersed widely in their first months, some traveling up to 80 kilometers before settling into regular foraging loops along the coast. By August 2025, 38 out of 45 released eagles were alive and accounted for, a survival rate near 84%, matching the best outcomes from Scottish and Scandinavian reintroductions. The tags don't just track survival, they show the birds establishing territories, returning to favored hunting grounds, and in one case, defending a nest at St. Catherine's Point, where the first English-born chick in 240 years fledged successfully. The monitoring team, reviewing thousands of location fixes, described the eagles as remarkably adaptable, with most surviving past the dangerous first year, and several now holding coastal territories year-round. These numbers confirm that the population is not only viable, but thriving, setting the stage for a new generation raised entirely in the wild. Carrion on the south coast now disappears almost as fast as the tide. Since the eagle's return, the rate of carcass removal has jumped by 27% at monitored sites. Gulls and foxes, once the main cleanup crew, find themselves edged out by a bird that can strip a seal or a mullet in minutes. Ravens, which had expanded their territories during the eagle's absence, have contracted their range by 15%, abandoning some of their traditional coastal roosts. The shift is not just about numbers, it is about who controls the resource and how quickly nutrients move through the system. Where carcasses once lingered, attracting noisy flocks and the risk of disease, now the beaches turn over clean in a matter of hours. Shorebird roosts, sensitive to the new order, have moved further inland or clustered in safer spots, away from eagle patrols. One local shellfish farmer put it plainly, "You used to smell the beach before you saw it." Now the AIR is cleaner, and the gulls don't crowd the tide line. Everything feels sharper, more alive. The eagles have redefined the rhythm of the coast, their appetite setting the pace for every scavenger and every cycle of decay. Today, every white-tailed eagle in England is tracked, monitored, and measured, yet the coastline still surprises us. Their return did not just add a predator, it rewired an entire food web, proving that even a handful of missing links can unleash cascading change. As rewilding accelerates worldwide, the lesson is clear. Restore a force of nature and you do not get back the past, you set the present in motion. What would you restore next?